So this is a video of how I interpreted the article of the Pedagogy of Multiliteracies and how it affects me and my life and the implication it bears on my multiliteracies. I'd like to start with, they begin with how this changes public lives. I believe there's a bit, there's language that falls in each of these categories that I'm about to explain. In your public life, I found it divided into, for me, three categories, that of school, work, and networking, or kind of the more formal social aspect of your life. And with school, you have to know how to work the system. You have to understand what your teachers want to hear and how to spit that back out at them for a test. And although we've discussed how this is a really ineffective way of teaching and of helping students understand what they're learning, it is still the primary mode of education in today's society. So there are words you have to know for each of your classes. For science-based, you have to understand the language for that. For history, for English, for math, there's certain language that goes with each, and things that you have to know, and a different section of your brain that you have to turn on for each. And I found that is very compartmentalized and changes with the ringing of a bell, as it were. At the end of class, you turn that part of your brain off and you turn on the next part of your brain, slipping into a different type of language for each. For work, I've worked in a couple different places. First, I worked at a summer camp for children who were less privileged, and you understand that there's certain language that you use and certain language that you do not use, and you don't bring up socioeconomic classes. You don't talk about money or how much this costs, how much my awesome new shoes cost, or how much my car costs. These are languages that you just don't use in a situation like that. And also, you aren't talking to adults, you're talking to children. I was working with 3rd to 5th graders for most of the summer, and then at the end I was working with kindergarten to 2nd graders. And you have to understand at ages like that, it's really challenging to reason with them. You can't just say, well, if you look at it from this point of view, if you've thought about changing your perspective, as it were, you can't. It's challenging to talk to children like that and still get your point across. And then I worked at a bakery for a year and a half, 2 different bakeries, and there's language you use in the kitchen and there's language you use at the counter. In the kitchen, it's cut and dry, and this needs to happen now, or this needs to happen at this time, or this is happening right now and something needs to be done about it. There's no mincing of words, but there's a calmness. There's always a calmness in a place like that where you are making a product and giving it to a customer, because there is to be no cause for panic or alarm. And then when you're out at the counter talking to customers, it's reassuring, it's answering questions. You have to know what you're talking about, and on one hand you need to make yourself sound like the smartest one at the table, but also make yourself relatable so that you don't seem like you are the smartest one at the table. And it's a balancing and it's an understanding, and it's for any sort of job in any sort of retail industry, whether it's selling food or clothes or cars. There is that separation of language. And moving into networking, or the formal social aspect of your life, there are ways that we connect with people. There's that small talk language that's sensitive. We aren't going to talk about anything heavy, but I'm going to understand enough about you so that I remember you in the future and that you remember me. I'm going to say something interesting enough for you to remember me. And it's a lot of trial and error, especially in this section, because you learn how people remember you well and how they remember you not so well. If you are the person who is the last one to leave the party, who is quite inebriated, and somebody has to carry you home or call you a taxi, that's not a good way to be remembered, but you will be remembered because you weren't wise about the decisions you made, and then the language that results from that, which is out of your control. But if you are intelligent and sensible, and you make it seem like you care about what's going on in their lives, then you'll be remembered as a person who they want to connect with in the future. And this is really important for bridging the gaps between your school life and your work life. Moving on to the private section, family language. There in my family personally, we use a lot of language, and we're very descriptive people, very articulate people, and that's just that comes a lot from my dad's side of the family for sure. Both of his parents were doctors, and he was raised with a certain level. It was like a bar of excellence that he had to meet, and he has kind of taught me the same, but it hasn't been meet this bar to be a good person. It was meet this bar and go beyond because you care about the things that you're learning about and talking about, and make people interested in what you have to say. So it's just been, we've always been a household of articulation, thinking before you speak. However, it is also a place I find that it's unwinding. You don't have to think too hard about what you say. As far as using rhetoric goes at home, I find that home is probably the place where I use the least amount of rhetoric, unless I'm trying to get an extra $25 or so on my debit account. Then I have to be a bit persuasive. But I find that it's a place where I can really relax, and I don't have to try and convince people. I usually can just sit back and enjoy and talk and laugh or whatever. However, along with my family personally, we had the death of a child last year in our family, my younger brother, and so this is language that we don't bring up usually. Or I try to avoid it. My parents not necessarily, but I do, because it brings a certain amount of tension or sadness or harsh feelings that turn a place of relaxation and comfort into a place of anger and resentment. So while it does have a certain element of rejuvenation, as it were, in my house, there's also that element of maybe this is not a good thing to say. And then also in your private life, your friends, your more casual social life. They're in my group of friends. Everybody knows what makes everybody else tick, in a good way, in a bad way. We avoid talking about certain things because we know it'll either get them into an argument or send them into a tailspin. On the other hand, we know what makes them laugh, what makes them feel better, what cheers them up. And so it's less of an understanding of specific language and more of an understanding of the meanings behind the language that we're using. So definitely going into that semiotics part of the article. And then along with your casual social life, I think also falls under that romantic social life. And while this is usually ignored in talking about linguistics, it came up a lot in my communications class because as humans, we look for companionship with another person who we can deem our best friend and partner for life. And as of today, and hopefully for a long time in the future, my romantic partner lives in England. And although they are also a privileged society in which we both speak English, in which there's a certain expectation of education and competency and understanding, the linguistics of both societies are quite different. And as well as in America, there are different regions in America that have different sorts of language, different dialects, different colloquialisms. The same thing goes over there. Even though it's a much, much smaller country, they have just as much division as we do culturally. Whereas in America, you have your Northeast, your New York, Boston, Pennsylvania, Detroit, Columbus, Ohio, kind of that's a very neutral dialect, and while people are more casual, they're less friendly. Maybe they're not as affectionate, but they are honest, brutally so. And this is highly contrasted in Southeast America, where we live now. Where it's, bless her little heart. And it's people in the South tend to dance around what they actually want to say for either saving their face or saving the feelings of others. And those are highly contrasted. I've only lived in these two places, so I don't know as much what it's like out west or in the Midwest. But those are the two contrasts that I can supply that might demonstrate what I'm trying to say. Over in England, there's a pretty big north-south division, not the same way that we have here through our Civil War, but it's the South thinks the North is stuck up, and the North thinks the South is dirty. Almost the same as here. But then they also have this odd Midlands region, which is where my significant other lives. And while over here, in America, we focus a lot on bringing the poverty line down and putting people on more of an equal and standard plane of living and of work and of education. Over there, the class system is still highly divided as far as income goes for a family. And this also influences the way you speak and what you mean when you say things. And over there are certain colloquialisms that we don't have over here, whether it's simple changes to grammatical syntax or whole different words that mean totally different things, they're always the classic example of fries are chips and chips are crisps and sweaters are jumpers and Band-Aids are plasters and things like that. Those are simple things, but they have a common meaning, something that isn't too far to relate, but it does take adjusting to understand that sort of language and to use it in a way that doesn't make you sound like a dunce. So I would say that literacy cross-culturally is really important for me, especially because I'd like to move to England eventually. I need to understand what it's like to be an American in a society that tends to look down on Americans, and to not let that stop me as far as getting a solid career goes. The last section I have on here is talking about different modes of literacy. I divided it up into two, and while these are somewhat not good names, I don't like them, but they're the only things I could think of to separate the two that I found to be most prevalent. The first section is grammar, and this is what they were talking about and what education is like today when you focus on monocultural, monolinguistic literacy, is you focus a lot on grammar and syntax and what is the right English to speak. This is disregarding all sorts of dialects and other subforms of English, such as Ebonics or things like that. It completely disregards that and doesn't count it as a real language. It's something to be understood, but not something that we would teach to other people. And so grammar is that formal, it's what's expected when you turn in formal essays or you speak publicly. It's what's expected of you to be understood on many different platforms. And while this is good, this, in my opinion, is teaching to the top of the class, as it were, because there are only so many people that really understand. If I were to give this article to a fifth grader in America, the level of complex syntax in this, the sentences are highly complex. I understand them because I'm an English major and also because I'm a college student. I understand them. But if I were to give this to somebody who didn't have the same level of education as I did, it would just go right over their heads, which I think is missing the entire point of what this article is getting at, and I would say is the one fault with this article, is it's not easy for the people who need to understand it to understand. Because as people advocating literacy and multiliteracies, we need to make sure that these, being multiliterate, as long as being someone who is good at rhetoric, is what is really important in advocating our position. And so while formal grammar, as I'm calling it, is important and it's what is necessary in today's education and society, I would say that we shouldn't move away from teaching it altogether, but I feel like it shouldn't be the number one be-all, end-all of learning English. And the second section I have, my personal favorite, I'm calling it poetry, which isn't just roses are red, violets are blue. Poetry is in words that take the form of art. And going back to what I was saying about my family life, we've always been an articulate family. I found there's a certain amount of catharsis in using words to be beautiful rather than just communicating. And when you use words to be beautiful, not only are you communicating what you want to say to your audience, but your audience is also taking tons of other messages, a plethora of messages from what you're trying to say. because you're saying it in a way that should be applicable to all people. So while words may be flowery or what have you, it should aim to connect to people on all different levels, however they find it connects best to them. And so I feel like poetry, as I'm calling it, should be taught more than grammar. How to use words to not only effectively communicate, but to draw an audience in and to make them feel something, which is, I think, as humans, what we should strive for. We should make people feel other things. And whether you're a cars salesman and you're making people feel the need to buy your used car, even though it has a broken window and it doesn't always start, you're making them feel something about, wow, I really want this car. Or whether you're a teacher teaching a student and you want to let them know that you aren't the only one that can teach. They can teach you too. And they shouldn't just be there to learn, but they should be there to grow and to explore and connect with other people. And so I think that English as an art form is highly disregarded. It's seen as something that isn't necessary. It's only for it's only for the poets, as it were. But I feel that from where I stand right now, and from where my education and my family life and my friends have brought me, I feel that reaching out to other people with words in the form of art is one of the most satisfying and fulfilling feelings that I've possibly felt in a long, long time. And so I believe that brings my discussion of multiliteracies to a close. Terribly sorry it's so long, but see you next time.